Last night's Jimmy Kimmel Live took an unexpected turn when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood her ground after the host called her spicy. What began as playful banter quickly escalated into a tense confrontation that left the audience stunned and social media buzzing. The studio lights seemed brighter than usual on the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live last night. The audience buzzed with excitement as the show's familiar theme music faded out. Jimmy Kimmel, with his signature grin, adjusted his tie and leaned forward in his chair. "Tonight we have a very special guest joining us," Jimmy announced to thunderous applause. "She's been making waves in Congress with her bold speeches and fearless approach to politics. Please welcome Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." The crowd erupted as Jasmine walked onto the stage with confidence, wearing a striking blue suit that matched her determined demeanor. She waved to the audience before taking her seat across from Jimmy. "Wow, you look amazing tonight," Jimmy began, his tone friendly and light. "Thanks for coming on our show despite your busy schedule fighting for the people." Jasmine smiled warmly. "Thank you for having me, Jimmy. It's great to be here." The interview started smoothly. They discussed her recent policy initiatives and her journey from lawyer to congresswoman. The audience seemed engaged, laughing at the right moments and applauding her accomplishments. But 20 minutes into the conversation, everything changed. "You know," Jimmy said with a chuckle. "I've been watching some of your speeches in Congress, and I have to say, you're quite spicy when you get going. I wouldn't want to be on your bad side." The audience laughed, but Jasmine's smile faded slightly. She took a deep breath before responding. "Spicy?" she repeated, her voice calm but firm. "That's an interesting choice of words, Jimmy." Jimmy, still smiling, seemed not to notice the shift in her tone. "Yeah, you know, fiery. You don't hold back." "I prefer to think of it as passionate and direct," Jasmine replied. "When men speak forcefully about issues they care about, they're called powerful or commanding. When women, especially women of color like myself, do the same, suddenly we're spicy or angry." A hush fell over the studio. Jimmy's smile wavered as he realized the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. "Oh, I didn't mean it like," he started. "I know you probably didn't," Jasmine cut in, her voice still even. "But words matter. The labels we use shape how people see us and how seriously they take our message." Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "You're absolutely right. I apologize if that came across wrong, but Jasmine wasn't finished. This isn't just about me or this moment. It's about all the women watching who have been called too emotional or difficult when they stand up for themselves. It's about breaking those patterns." The audience, initially stunned by the tension, began to applaud. Jimmy nodded, looking both surprised and somewhat flustered. "You make an excellent point," he conceded. "Let's change tracks. I wanted to ask about your recent bill." "I appreciate that you want to move on," Jasmine interrupted. "But this is exactly the problem. When uncomfortable conversations about race or gender come up, there's a rush to change the subject. Let's sit with this moment for a second." Jimmy's face reddened. The cameras zoomed in on the growing tension between host and guest. Backstage, producers whispered frantically into their headsets. "You're right," Jimmy admitted after a pause. "I'm not always aware of how my words might come across. This is a learning moment for me." "It's a learning moment for all of us," Jasmine agreed. "And that's why I speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." When the show cut to commercial, the tension remained. Viewers at home could see Jimmy leaning over to speak with Jasmine off mic, his expression serious. Whatever was said during that break clearly didn't resolve things because when they returned, the atmosphere was even more charged. "Welcome back to Jimmy Kimmel Live," Jimmy said, his usual casual demeanor noticeably strained. "We're here with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, having what I think is one of the most important conversations we've had on this show." Jasmine nodded. "Thank you for acknowledging that, Jimmy." Before the break, You were making a powerful point about language and perception. I think a lot of people, myself included, don't always realize the impact of casual comments. That's exactly it, Jasmine replied, leaning forward. These casual comments reinforce stereotypes that have real consequences. They affect how people see me in Congress, how my ideas are received, whether I'm taken seriously. Jimmy attempted to lighten the mood. Well, I can tell you one thing. Everyone's taking this conversation very seriously right now. He laughed, nervously, but few in the audience joined him. Jasmine didn't smile. This isn't about making people uncomfortable, Jimmy. It's about growth. Sometimes the most important conversations are the hardest ones to have. The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators exchanged glances. The audience sat in rapt attention, unsure whether they were watching a heated debate or a genuine moment of cultural reckoning on live television. You know what? Jimmy said suddenly. You're absolutely right. I made a mistake with my choice of words, and rather than genuinely listening, my first instinct was to move past it. That's on me. The audience applauded, but Jasmine raised her hand. I appreciate that, but this isn't about forcing an apology. It's about understanding why these patterns persist and how we can all do better. As they continued their discussion, neither backing down from their positions, viewers at home took to social media in droves. Kimmel Crockett started trending nationwide. Comments ranged from support for Jasmine's stance to criticism that she was overreacting. What everyone agreed on was that this was unlike any late-night interview they'd seen before. The segment was scheduled to end, but neither Jimmy nor Jasmine seemed ready to conclude their increasingly heated exchange. The floor director signaled, desperately, that they needed to wrap up, but Jimmy waved him off. We're going to extend this segment, he announced to the audience. I think what's happening here is too important to cut short. What happened next would be the moment that truly set social media on fire. You know what, Jimmy? Jasmine said, her voice calm but firm. I think this conversation highlights exactly why I ran for Congress in the first place. There are uncomfortable truths that need to be addressed, even on late-night television. Jimmy shifted in his seat. I'm listening. When you called me spicy, it might have seemed harmless to you and many viewers, but that word has a loaded history when applied to women of color. It reduces us to a stereotype, the fiery woman, who's all emotion and no substance. The audience was so quiet you could hear the studio lights humming. Jimmy's usual quick comebacks failed him as Jasmine continued. Every day in Congress, I watch my male colleagues get praised for the same behavior I get criticized for. They're passionate while I'm angry. They're direct while I'm difficult. Jimmy attempted to regain control of the interview. I completely understand what you're saying, and do you? Jasmine challenged. Because understanding means acknowledging your own role in perpetuating these stereotypes, even unintentionally. The cameras captured Jimmy's face, turning a deeper shade of red. A production assistant hurried to the edge of the stage, but Jimmy waved them away again. You're questioning my integrity now, Jimmy said, his voice rising slightly. I've spent years using this platform to advocate for progress and equality. And I appreciate that work, Jasmine replied. But even allies make mistakes. The question is how we respond when those mistakes are pointed out. The tension in the studio was electric. Audience members exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they had expected from Jimmy Kimmel Live. Let me be clear, Jimmy said, leaning forward. I respect you enormously. That's why I invited you on the show. But I feel like you're painting me as someone who doesn't care about these issues, and that's simply not true. I'm not questioning your character, Jimmy. I'm asking you to examine your language. There's a difference. The show's band leader sensed the mounting tension and played a quick musical sting, hoping to diffuse the situation. It didn't work. You know what? Jimmy said, standing up suddenly. Let's take another commercial break. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. The on-air sign dimmed, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing what happened next. Jimmy stepped closer to Jasmine, his microphone still hot. "I'm trying to have a good faith conversation here," he said, voice low but intense. "But it feels like you came looking for a fight." Jasmine stood too, now eye to eye with the host. "And there it is. When women stand their ground, they're looking for a fight. I came to have an honest conversation, Jimmy. That's all." Neither realized their exchange was being broadcast to the studio audience through open mics. Viewers at home couldn't hear them during the commercial, but everyone in the studio gasped. A producer rushed onto the stage. "Mics are live in the studio," he whispered urgently. Jimmy's eyes widened as he realized his private words had been heard by the entire audience. The damage was done. When the show returned from commercial, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The easy rapport that Jimmy usually established with his guests was gone, replaced by strained politeness. "Welcome back," Jimmy said, his voice overly cheerful. "Before the break, Congresswoman Crockett and I were having a spirited discussion about language and perception." "I think honest would be a better word than spirited," Jasmine corrected. Jimmy cleared his throat. "Yes, an honest discussion. And I want to publicly apologize for what I said during the break. It was inappropriate and defensive," the audience murmured in surprise. Those at home who hadn't heard the off-air exchange were now burning with curiosity. "I appreciate that," Jasmine said. "And I want to be clear. I don't think you're a bad person, Jimmy. But good people can perpetuate harmful patterns without realizing it." Jimmy nodded slowly. "You're right. And I should know better. My question now is, where do we go from here? How do we make this a productive conversation rather than just an uncomfortable moment on television?" "That's a great question," Jasmine replied. "I think it starts with listening. Really listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak, or thinking about how to defend yourself." The audience applauded, sensing a potential resolution. But then Jimmy made another misstep. "Well, I've certainly learned my lesson about calling powerful women spicy," he said with a forced laugh. "Guess I'll stick to safer topics from now on." Jasmine's expression hardened. "And that's exactly the wrong takeaway, Jimmy. The goal isn't to avoid difficult conversations. It's to have them in a respectful way that acknowledges everyone's humanity." "That's not what I meant," Jimmy began, but Jasmine cut him off. "Isn't it, though? Because it sounds like you're saying it would be easier to just not engage with these issues at all. And that's part of the problem." The studio temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. What had momentarily looked like reconciliation was now spiraling into an even more heated confrontation. "You're putting words in my mouth," Jimmy said sharply. "I've spent my entire career talking about difficult issues. I'm not afraid of this conversation." "Then have it," Jasmine challenged. "Without deflecting, without jokes, without trying to move on to the next segment. Just have the conversation." The audience was completely still, witnessing something they never expected to see on late-night television. The show's director frantically signaled to go to another commercial break, but both Jimmy and Jasmine ignored the cues. What happened in the next few minutes would leave the entire nation talking. "Fine," Jimmy said, removing his earpiece and tossing it aside. "Let's have this conversation. No jokes, no deflection. You think I don't understand the impact of my words?" "I think you understand it intellectually," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "But I don't think you feel it. You don't live with the consequences." Jimmy leaned forward. "Then help me understand. Help everyone watching understand." "Every day," Jasmine began, "I walk into rooms where I'm immediately underestimated, where I have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, where words like spicy and angry are used to dismiss me rather than engage with my ideas." The audience was completely silent. "And you think I called you spicy to dismiss you?" Jimmy asked. "I don't think that was your intention," Jasmine's acknowledged. "But impact matters more than intention, And the impact of those words, especially on national television, is to reinforce stereotypes that make my job harder. For the first time that night, Jimmy was truly listening, not thinking about his next response, not worrying about the show's format, just listening. "I never thought about it that way," he admitted. "And that's my privilege showing, isn't it?" "Yes," Jasmine said simply. "It is." The production team watched in amazement. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how late-night TV worked, but it was happening. "So where do we go from here?" Jimmy asked. "We keep talking," Jasmine said. "Not just you and me, but all of us. We recognize these patterns. We call them out. We do better." Jimmy nodded slowly. "I want to do better. But I also need to be honest. This is uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable." "Growth usually is," Jasmine replied with the hint of a smile. "But it's worth it." It seemed like the tension might be easing. But then a producer rushed onto the stage and handed Jimmy a card. He read it, his expression darkening. "Apparently," he said, "the network executives are demanding we end this segment now and move on to the planned comedy bit." Jasmine's eyebrows raised. "And what are you going to do?" The audience held their breath. Jimmy looked from the card to Jasmine, then out at the studio audience, and finally directly into the camera. "I'm going to tell them no," he said firmly. "This conversation is too important." The audience erupted in applause. But Jasmine wasn't celebrating. "That's easy to say, Jimmy. But will you still feel that way when they threaten your job, your show? Because that's the kind of pressure women and people of color face every day when we speak up." Jimmy's face fell as he realized the truth in her words. "You're right. It's easy for me to be brave for one night. You do this every day." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "And now imagine doing it without your platform, without your fame, without the applause." The tension in the studio was building again. A network executive appeared at the edge of the stage, gesturing frantically. "They're cutting to commercial in 10 seconds whether we like it or not," Jimmy said. "What do you want to do?" Jasmine stood up. "I think I've made my point. Thank you for the invitation, Jimmy, but I won't be part of a show that values comedy bits over meaningful conversation." She removed her microphone and began walking off stage. The audience gasped. Jimmy jumped to his feet. "Wait," he called after her. "Please don't leave. You're right. This conversation matters." Jasmine paused. "Does it matter enough for you to risk your show?" The director was counting down. 5, 4, 3. Jimmy made his decision. He turned to the camera and said, "We'll be right back after this break. And when we return, Congresswoman Crockett and I will continue our discussion. For as long as it takes. No comedy bits, no planned segments, just real talk." The on-air sign went dark. The executive stormed onto the stage. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "This isn't what people tune in for." "Maybe it should be," Jimmy replied. He turned to where Jasmine stood at the edge of the stage. "Please, stay." The audience watched this unscripted drama unfold, many recording on their phones. In minutes, clips would flood social media. Real Talk with Jimmy would start trending nationwide. Jasmine walked back to the center of the stage. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. No more jokes at my expense. No more stereotypes. Just honest conversation." "You have my word," Jimmy promised. When the show returned from commercial break, the set had been transformed. The usual desk was gone, replaced by 2 comfortable chairs facing each other. No barriers, no distractions. "Welcome back to what has become a very different episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live," Jimmy said to the camera. "Tonight we're setting aside our usual format to have a real conversation about language, perception, and the power of words. Congresswoman Crockett has graciously agreed to stay and help us all learn something." What followed was unlike anything seen before on late-night television. For 30 minutes, host and guest engaged in genuine dialogue about race, gender, and power. They disagreed at times, but with respect. The audience witnessed something rare: two people from different worlds finding common ground. As the show came to its conclusion, Jimmy turned to Jasmine. "Thank you for not walking out. Thank you for pushing me to be better." "Thank you for listening," Jasmine replied. "That's all any of us really want." The show ended not with a joke or a musical performance, but with a handshake that turned into a hug. As the credits rolled, social media exploded with reactions. Some praised the raw honesty, others criticized the departure from entertainment. But everyone was talking. Backstage, network executives were furious. Ratings would determine Jimmy's fate. But as Jasmine left the studio that night, surrounded by reporters asking for comment, she knew something important had happened. "Sometimes," she told them, "the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground. Not with anger, but with truth." The next morning, clips from the show had been viewed millions of times. Talk shows and news programs debated the exchange. Had Jimmy been too defensive? Had Jasmine been too confrontational? But beneath these questions lay a deeper recognition. They had witnessed something authentic in a medium often criticized for its artifice. 3 days later, Jimmy opened his show with a simple statement. "Last week I learned something valuable about the power of words. I'm still learning, and I hope you'll learn along with me." The network didn't cancel him. In fact, ratings soared as viewers tuned in to see the new, more thoughtful Jimmy Kimmel. As for Jasmine, her inbox filled with messages from women who had found courage in her refusal to back down. What began as a tense confrontation had become something more: a moment of genuine connection and growth, broadcast for all to see.